I think we need to make sure that the public is educated about the benefits of clinical trials. All the patients who participate in clinical trials are definitely heroes because they're putting themselves out there.
Welcome to Believe in Progress, the American Association for Cancer Research Foundation podcast. Join us and be inspired by the incredible stories of those who have faced cancer with strength and resilience, and the medical professionals who are working tirelessly to find new treatments and ultimately a cure. Believe in Progress isn't just about the science of cancer. It's about the human side of this disease. Together, we can make progress in the fight against cancer and bring hope to those who need it most. How do life-saving medicines actually make it from the lab to the people who need them the most? What does it take to turn a groundbreaking discovery into a treatment that changes lives? These are the questions we'll explore in today's episode of Believe in Progress, the podcast brought to you by the American Association for Cancer Research Foundation. I'm your host, Mitch Stoller, the Chief Philanthropic Officer at AACR, and today we're honored to welcome Dr. William Powell, a physician scientist, pharmaceutical leader, and author who spent his career advancing cutting-edge treatments in oncology and beyond. Dr. William Powell is the Chief Executive Officer of Revelio Therapeutics, Inc. Prior to this role, he led the Global Product Development Organization at Pfizer, overseeing the clinical development and advancement of the company's pipeline of innovative medicines, as well as regulatory affairs supporting Pfizer's R&D pipeline and marketed therapies. Dr. Powell has also served as a member of Pfizer's executive leadership team, the head of Roche Pharma Research and Early Development, and a member of Roche's enlarged corporate executive committee. But beyond his leadership in medicine, Dr. Powell is now bringing us inside the world of drug discovery with his new book, Breakthrough: The Quest for Life-Changing Medicines. This book takes us behind the scenes of 8 revolutionary treatments, uncovering the stories of scientists, doctors, and patients who are shaping the future of medicine. It reminds us that while we often hear about the challenges in healthcare, there's another side to the story, one of perseverance, breakthroughs, and hope. In this episode, we'll discuss the journey of developing new treatments and the obstacles scientists face in getting them to patients, the pivotal moments and unexpected twists behind life-saving medicines, the role of collaboration, innovation, and even luck in drug discovery, the future of cancer research and the impact of scientific advancements on patient care. If you've ever wondered about the process behind the medicines that improve and save lives, or if you want to hear from one of the leaders at the forefront of this work, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Dr. Powell, welcome to Believe in Progress. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate seeing you again, William.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great to have you here. So what inspired you to write the book?
Yeah, so I wrote the book for 3 main reasons. The first one is to highlight the unsung heroes of drug development. There are a lot of people working every day, totally invisible to the public, whether in academia, biotech, or industry, doing experiments, designing trials, etc. They deserve to be recognized and their stories to be told. So that's the first reason. The second is, there's too few books about innovation in drug discovery, actually. So when I was the head of Roche Pharma Research Early Development, I was trying to read a lot of books about innovation and how to create an innovation culture. And most of the books out there are about going to the moon or about electric cars or iPhones and so on. Very few about drug discovery. And I personally thought that, there's actually just as much, if not more, innovation going on in drug discovery, because unlike an iPhone that you can put in your pocket but not in your mouth, a medicine you actually need to put into your body. And not only do you put it in your body, but it's supposed to help you and then not kill you. So I just think there's a lot of innovation going on there that deserves to be recognized, and lessons for the public about that. And then finally, I wanted to inspire the next generation of people to make more breakthroughs, whether in science, in medicine, or in other areas.
One time you and I had a conversation, and you were telling me about your dad and how he inspired one of the reasons you got into medicine.
Yeah. So unfortunately, when I was 13, my father passed away of metastatic colon cancer unexpectedly. He was a physician, and actually my mom was too. So it was sort of expected that both my sister and I would go into medicine. But at that time, I really did vow that I would try to make a difference for patients like him. Really had no clue at age 13 how I was going to do that. But about 20 years later or so, after tons of training, MD, PhD, residency, fellowship, and so on, then I was able to start to have my own translational laboratory doing cancer research, as you know, and seeing patients as well as helping with trials. So really have dedicated my life to trying to help patients like my dad. And I'm sure many people who are doing science and medicine have some kind of personal motivation like that as well, whether it's a family member or a friend, a relative.
So, William, the title Breakthrough suggests persistence and overcoming barriers. Could you share an example from the book of a breakthrough moment that shaped your career or changed the trajectory of medical research?
Well, one of the chapters, as you know, is about osimertinib, which is an EGFR tyrosine kinase inhibitor that's now approved for EGFR mutant lung cancer, a subtype of non-small cell lung cancer. It's hard to believe, but back in 2003 now, when I was a postdoc in the lab of Harold Barmas, we were trying to identify why drugs like that were new at the time, Aresta and Tarceva, why they only worked in 10% of lung cancer patients. And, many other groups around the country were working on this as well. Long story short is it turned out to be the EGFR mutations, which we all know about now, but we didn't know about 20 years ago. And that really was a watershed moment. You'll see in the book I wrote about how I got scooped academically, but really that kind of work and understanding the power of translational science and taking what you observe in the clinic and really figuring it out at the molecular level and then going back to the clinic, that really was a powerful watershed moment for myself and really motivated me to keep going, and then ultimately to get into drug development full time.
Over your career, you've had a lot of leadership positions in academia. Tell me about how your perspective has changed with cancer treatment and drug development. How has it evolved over time?
I guess in retrospect, I would say I was pretty naive in terms of how the whole process worked. I think in academia, you obviously, as a physician, and if you're treating patients, you interact with people from biotechs and pharma who have the molecules and are ready to do the trials. So you already have the molecule in hand, so to speak. So more of the help there from the academic is, how do you design the trial correctly? Who are the right patients and so on? And then once you're in the clinic in a trial, what are you observing? Are you seeing responses or not? Are there side effects? And so on. From a discovery side, I think I totally underappreciated how much goes into actually going from an idea into bringing that molecule into the clinic. I think most of the time, also as an academic, I would interact with one or two main scientists at pharma or biotech. But once I got to Roche, for example, I realized that there were thousands of people who were working on the molecule, and experts in multiple different fields, even experts in, just how do you formulate the drug? Or if it's an antibody, what should the solution be in? Or, if it's a small molecule, there's so many different elements, not only from the chemistry side, but then also from the toxicology side that you have to take into account and so on. So I think a lot of that is, at least I underappreciated when I made the transition from academia to industry. And part of the book, I'm trying to illustrate also just all the challenges that people have to go through to actually go, again, from an idea to a medicine. Like one of the chapters, which is about alpelisib, it's a PI3K inhibitor from Novartis, which is approved for breast cancer. I deliberately, with their permission, obviously, talked about how they brought 4 molecules into clinic. And, the first 3, all of them failed, not because they weren't doing good science, but because, once you get into the clinic, you can have unpredictable things happen. Either the molecule doesn't work the way you think it's supposed to work, or it might have some toxicity that you didn't expect. And so, they persisted and persevered. And finally, the 4th molecule was the one that ultimately made it. And each chapter, as you mentioned, there's 8 molecules from 8 different companies. Each chapter virtually talks about how, there's several failure points. And the scientists in the group had to think about it, pick themselves up off the floor and keep going.
You think there's always failure in the development of drugs? I mean, there's always some type of a failure before it succeeds?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example where there's no failure. I think, if we had human model systems that could completely predict what would happen when a new molecule goes into a human being, maybe we'd have less, but, we don't. We have preclinical models, we have cell lines, then we have animal models. None of them, unfortunately, despite all the great research that we do, completely faithfully mimic what happens in humans, either in the disease or in how the drug is metabolized. And so either the theory was wrong and it didn't work the way we wanted to, or we have a molecule that doesn't do exactly what it's supposed to do, or we have unexpected side effects that would ultimately lead to, patients not tolerating that drug. There's just so many reasons why molecules can fail.
Right. But to be in academia and even in industry, you must have to have lots of perseverance.
I think virtually every story in the book has to have, how do you learn from what you did as quickly as possible, or learn from what others did too, and then figure out how to adjust and keep going and overcome the obstacles. Many times in the chapters, you'll see that, the senior leaders are pushing the teams and saying like, hey, you got to make a decision on whether this molecule will continue or not, or else we're stopping it. One of the molecules was emicizumab, which is a bispecific antibody for hemophilia A. Yeah, the team was basically given a time limit and a deadline, and if they didn't make progress, that molecule would have never made it.
How long did it take you to write the book?
So I started in the spring of 2020, and then I guess I finished in October 23. I did have a day job, so
I remember that.
It was more of a labor of passion, because I really wanted to tell the stories about, how molecules do make it from an academic idea, to a biotech maybe, and then ultimately in pharma. I think what's unique about the book is I got access, as we mentioned, there's 8 molecules from 8 different companies. I actually got access to the different companies and the scientists in the different companies.
How did you even come up with the idea of 8?
That's an interesting idea. I think 8 was a good round number. The molecules I did choose for several reasons. One is it had to have cool science. So hopefully people appreciate that each molecule in there has some really cutting edge scientific principles. Like there's an RNA oral splicing modifier, there's a bispecific antibody, there's gene editing, and so on. Second criteria is that it has to have an impact on patients. And then the third is I did have to get, permission, so to speak, from the different companies. Thought about originally maybe I could write about all molecules at one company, like at Roche or something like that.
Right.
But then I thought people might think I'm just favoring one company too much. So I actually emailed my colleagues and friends around who were heads of R&D in the different companies and, said, hey, would you be willing to contribute a molecule to a book about innovation in drug discovery? And, most of the time, well, actually what I thought was going to happen was they would say, no way. But most of them said yes, actually. And we're happy to have the stories told.
Are you surprised by that they were so agreeable?
I was, definitely. But I think they appreciate, too, that, there's a lot of people working very hard every day, trying to overcome obstacles, doing great science, particularly in pharma and also in biotech. There are a lot of people that you don't publish as much as in academia. You don't get as much recognition. You may not even get rights to you get the patent, but in a company, you don't even get royalties from that directly. And so people are working just, hard every day. I think my colleagues appreciated that the stories deserve to be told.
The audience should know that Dr. Powell is a member of the AACR Board of Directors, and I know you're a volunteer with lots of other organizations, or a few other organizations as well. How did you discipline yourself? Is there a certain time you wrote or did research into the book?
Yeah, I mean, I did have some help with doing the research and the interviews of the book. Mm-hmm. And then I spent most of the time, making sure that the ideas and the stories, the way I wanted to tell them, were done the way they are. You'll see, I think the 8 different chapters really unravel a little bit like mysteries. Punchline is that they all did succeed in the end to get approved. That was not a foregone conclusion, though, I would say, because originally 2 of the molecules hadn't been approved yet when I started the book. One was lenacapavir, which is the capsid inhibitor that's recently been approved for HIV. It's a really novel molecule. It actually won the 2024 Science Magazine Breakthrough of the Year unexpectedly, because of the great science coming out and the clinical data. But that only had breakthrough designation when I started. The other one was the gene editing of BCL11A for sickle cell disease developed by CRISPR and Vertex. And that one also had breakthrough, but was not approved. And actually, the intent at the time was that, okay, maybe if 1 or 2 don't get approved, that's okay, because that also will illustrate to the public just how challenging it is. But fortunately, both of them ended up getting approved.
So the public really does not have, I don't think, a great understanding of how hard it is to get a drug through. Do you want this book also to be an education device for the public as well to have a better understanding. And as you know, we talk a lot at AACR and at the board level about trust in science and things like that. I mean, is this one of your goals of the book?
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to educate the public about just what it takes. I think having read the book, you know this, but there are really only 1,800 new molecular entities, ever approved by regulatory agencies in the U.S. as of December 2022. So usually when I ask people like in the audience, like how many drugs do you think have been approved in the history of, the US? Sometimes I get like 10,000, 20,000, but there are only 1,800 or so. So it's not every day that happens. And that's because it's just very challenging. I think it's important for the public to know that. And I think it's important for the public to understand, the scientific process is not a linear one. It's not like I can say today, hey, I have a great target. I'm going to make a drug and then I'll have one like in 3 years or something like that. There could be a lot of failure on that particular one, but maybe another idea worked. All these things have to come together in a certain way for us to be successful with that.
A lot of this book talks about innovation, right, and breakthroughs. How do you see the role of public-private partnerships with organizations, like AACR and others? How important are these types of relationships in getting to the end result?
If you read the book, and I think if you look at also the history of multiple molecules and other breakthroughs in general, a lot of innovation just comes from curiosity-driven research, which is funded by the public. We wouldn't have, for example, drugs like osimertinib, which is an epidermal growth factor receptor tyrosine kinase inhibitor. I know that's a mouthful, but if people in the 1950s didn't wonder, like, how do cells grow in general, right? They weren't developing a drug in the 1950s. They were just curious about basic science.
Mm-hmm.
And those basic science discoveries funded by the public ultimately led to a lot of breakthroughs, not only osimertinib, but other drugs as well. And each chapter will highlight, how basically that fundamental questions that were funded by the public in basic research ultimately led many years later to some kind of breakthrough drug discovery. I think that's another point of the book, which is, again, drug discovery is not linear. It's not something that you can completely plan. And often you can try for many, many years and you can have a breakthrough, say, in 1950, but then the next breakthrough doesn't come till 1980 or 1990, and then the next one doesn't come till 2010. And so I think, that's hard to sort of think about conceptually, but that is the truth about drug discovery. And so public-private partnerships are absolutely critical. And, during this time, we really need to speak up for those who believe in science and for our scientists, I think.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. How do you think we can better tackle this whole issue of trust in science, and what kind of things can we do? And if people out there in the audience want to do more, be better advocates, what would you recommend?
Well, I think if we believe in science, I do think that scientists are the ones who make new breakthroughs. They potentially make breakthroughs that lead to new medicines, new ways to image, and so on, new ways to monitor. Scientists aren't perfect either; they're human beings, but they do make progress ultimately. So I think one is we need to speak up for our scientists and make sure that if we feel strongly about it, that we're telling our representatives that we need to be supporting our scientists and fund the scientists. The second thing is I do think we need to do a better job of just educating the public and speaking about how science works and the benefits of science, and also not overstating our results in science. But if you read my book again, then you'll see that drug discovery and getting a particular drug approved in a particular indication, it just takes a long time.
Yeah, I always have thought about how we glorify athletes, and rightfully so. I mean, I've always been a big fan of great athletes. I think we should do the same thing for scientists, though. I mean, there's no reason that a scientist shouldn't be up on a pedestal similar to like a great athlete here in Philadelphia or in New York or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some cultures that do that more than others.
In your book, you highlight the critical role of clinical trials. How do we make clinical trials more accessible and inclusive, particularly for underserved and minority communities?
So, for example, if we're testing a new molecule in breast cancer and there's a new target, we should be testing all the relevant patient populations with whom we think that's going to be relevant, because then if we only test it in one population, then we don't even know if it's going to be efficacious in that other population. So we do need to have diverse clinical trial enrollment. I think we need to make sure that the public is educated about the benefits of clinical trials. All the patients who participate in clinical trials are definitely heroes because they're putting themselves out there. Sometimes they may be getting randomized to, a standard of care versus a new drug, but that's actually really important for us to make progress also. So if it's very difficult for them to access a clinical trial, we as a community need to figure out how to do that better and make those opportunities available for as many people as possible.
Is some of those opportunities are a little more like local community centers, you think? I mean, do you think there's opportunities there? Community cancer centers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many private oncology groups now that also do clinical trials. It is a little bit of a different focus compared to academic centers. Most of the private oncologists know the value of, clinical trials, and if they need to refer their patients to the sites that do them, hopefully they're doing that. I think with new tools, either social media or even potentially machine learning and AI, patients can also learn about where these trials are done, and maybe we can even identify patients faster and then get them to the right place or right doctor so that we can get these trials done faster.
Do you touch on AI at all in the book with some of these companies, or was that like before AI really hit?
Well, no, we were talking about machine learning and how artificial intelligence could potentially benefit. I think the main part I talk about it is with nirmatrelvir and ritonavir, which is Paxlovid, protease inhibitor that's approved for COVID-19. Pfizer did use machine learning AI to narrow down the number of molecules to screen against the 3CL protease. So I definitely think AML, machine learning, and artificial intelligence will be used in multiple different parts of drug development to speed up the process. I did used to say that, I didn't think that machine learning or artificial intelligence would ever win a Nobel Prize, but I was wrong because AlphaFold just won the Nobel Prize. But I still think there is still value in good old-fashioned drug hunting. And also in the book, you'll see there's a lot of role. Serendipity has a big role, meaning luck. Making the observation that was unexpected, or taking something that might seem like a failure and turning it into success is also a big part of drug discovery. And I'm just curious how artificial intelligence is going to lead to those insights. I do think that's a real human trait.
So were you involved with Paxlovid when you were at Pfizer? Must have been pretty amazing to be around that.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It already had emergency use authorization, but I did play a small part in getting the final approval. By the time Paxlovid got approved, I should say nirmatrelvir got approved, it had already been given to 14 million patients. So I do think it's the probably single drug that was had given to the most number of people before official approval.
So looking back at your wonderful career, and you're still involved in your career, what lessons like about resilience in the face of scientific setbacks have you learned?
Yeah, and I think this is a real important one for, just future generations, which is that failure is a part of the process. We shouldn't be afraid to fail. In fact, the riskier the project, probably the more likelihood there is for failure. But without failure, we wouldn't learn about how to be successful. And you can go through a lot of dead ends, but as long as you're learning from that process, it's important to learn from each failure. I think ultimately people will be successful. So not only having that mindset, but then also the resilience and the determination to keep going are really, really important.
This whole failure and success model, if you will, I think resonates in lots of different areas.
Oh yeah, it's not just a drug discovery. I mean, particularly in a lot of other areas, well, the mantra is usually just fail fast, right? Drug development is expensive also. So if you're going to fail, then it's better to learn about the failure as soon as possible. But, it's actually a little bit of a misnomer to call it failure because it's just a dead end. And if we're learning from that process, then, hopefully then the next one will be successful. You'll see in the book that I interview many, of the chemists or the protein engineers, and some of them spend like almost their entire career without getting a molecule approved. And then all of a sudden, this one, the one I wrote about, right, is the one that they got approved. But that's not uncommon.
How do they stick to it their whole career?
Well, I think one is you got to sort of love what you're doing, right?
Yes.
My analogy there is I play a lot of tennis, and if you're focused always on winning and the end game, like I'm going to win 6-1, 6-2, or the score kind of thing, then you can get very messed up, so to speak. Tennis is a mental game too. But I think, if you're doing drug development and you're only focused on, I got to get this launched, and you're not paying attention to the everyday, like, hey, am I designing this experiment the right way? Do I have the right positive and negative controls? And getting really excited about that, then you also can fail. So I think you do have to really be into this, into the process itself rather than the end game.
As a physician scientist and now an author, what advice would you give to young researchers who are passionate about making a meaningful impact in medicine?
Hopefully the book will inspire new generations to make innovations, as I mentioned, not only in cancer, there's still other unmet medical needs in Alzheimer's and many other diseases and so on. I think starting out, I would say really, make sure you learn and become an expert at something. As a graduate student, master that area. As a postdoc, totally master that area. And as you gain the knowledge, then you can start to expand into other areas. But you really need to have that foundation to be able to springboard into other areas.
Have you heard from some young scientists that have read the book and gotten any feedback about the book?
I would say the most inspiring comments I've gotten are from people who actually asked me to sign the book to their parents. And then they say, well, now my parent will actually know what I'm doing in life.
That's funny. So William, the quest for life-changing medicines never stops. What areas of medical research do you believe hold the greatest promise for the next major breakthroughs?
Yeah, well, I think cancer still needs to continue to have more breakthroughs. We've made a lot of progress. I think, even AACR always talks about it in the annual report, how more patients are living longer with cancer. But at the same time, I was a little shocked in the 2024 AACR report to hear that the number of cases will continue to increase by 2050. And actually, the number of deaths is almost expected to double by 2050. And there's even an increasing number of young people now with cancer. So we still need to make progress. We still need new breakthroughs because it's ultimately the new breakthroughs that will lead to the new medicines. So I'm a big believer in the basic science of cancer research and making sure that, we continue to understand how, unfortunately, cancers arise, how they grow, how they spread, and then how can we attack that.
So can we ask you about your new company and a little bit about that and what your plans are?
You can ask. I probably won't say very much. The company's called Revelio Therapeutics. We're still what's called in stealth mode. We're funded to bring 3 molecules into the clinic. We hope to have our first development candidate by the second half of this year. And we're making cancer biologics in a really novel way. That's about all I'll say.
Is there another book in your future?
Yeah, well, I think I really enjoyed writing it. I think every molecule that gets approved probably has amazing stories behind it. And so, yeah, I guess if there's a lot of success in this one, then maybe I'll consider a volume 2.
And best place for people to get the book, Amazon, lots of other places, right?
Yeah, well, it's available in the U.S. now as of January 2025. So Barnes & Noble, Simon Schuster. Simon Schuster distributes in the U.S., so there's a lot of available places. But you can get on Amazon either the hardback or the Kindle version, and then the paperback version will come out later this year.
And I'm a lay person. I'm not a scientist, and book read very well. And I got a new understanding of a number of different molecules. I congratulate you for this. This is a fantastic endeavor, and more importantly, it's you're providing a wonderful tool for many different people, for young scientists, for general public, industry, government, many people, right?
Hopefully the right people also read it.
Yes.
Again, you can have a disease described in 1910 and then no real breakthrough on how it arises till 1950. I'm thinking of like sickle cell disease here, right? And then another breakthrough in 1990. And hopefully, as we mentioned, machine learning and AI will speed some of that up, but there's still just going to be a lot of trial and error. But really, in life and in innovative processes, you have to have what's called emergent learning, which is you're learning as you go. You don't have all the answers. You got to keep going, because if you waited till you had all the answers, you would never even start. And then as long as you're learning as fast as possible from, as I mentioned, the failures as well as the successes, then you'll be positioned to be successful with whatever innovation you make.
Well, to our audience, Breakthrough: The Quest for Life-Changing Medicines. Go out and buy the book. You'll learn a lot. And William Powell, Dr. Powell, I can't thank you enough for all you do for us at AACR, the wisdom and guidance you provide for us, but everything else that you do. You're a wonderful physician scientist, and you're a great friend of the organization, and really appreciate it.
Well, thanks a lot. Likewise, Mitch, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Dr. Powell's insights remind us that every medicine we rely on today started as an idea, a challenge, and a journey of persistence. His new book, Breakthrough, sheds light on the incredible work happening behind the scenes to bring life-changing treatments to patients. If this conversation's inspired you like it inspired me, here's how you can take action. Read Dr. Powell's book, Breakthrough: The Quest for Life-Changing Medicines. Get a firsthand look at the stories behind some of the most important medical breakthroughs of our time. Support cancer research at aacr.org. Every donation helps fund groundbreaking studies that lead to new treatments and cures. Share this episode. Help spread awareness about the power of research and innovation in the fight against cancer. Dr. Powell, thank you for your leadership, your dedication to science, and for sharing your journey with us today. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Believe in Progress. Remember, cancer research saves lives, and your support makes a difference. Subscribe to the podcast, share this episode, and stay tuned for more inspiring stories. And remember to believe in progress in the fight against cancer. Produced by CollegeCast LLC. And remember, cancer research saves lives.